We got Preston Holland.
Welcome to the
There he
stream.
is. There he
What
is.
is up, brothers? What
What's
is up,
up?
brothers?
How you doing?
If there's anything that we should talk about in the Temple of Technology, it is private jets. I think that this is
Yes.
There we
probably
go.
one of the more fitting segments.
No, we've been waiting for this. You're our private aviation correspondent. You got
Yes.
the professional studio lighting set up. You're looking great.
Should we
Let's
kick it off
just-
with G650ER versus BBJ? You know, like a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of our listeners are trying to decide between those two. What considerations would you make if you're trying to make a big purchase?
If you're going BBJ or 650ER, personally, I'm going 650ER for the sole reason that the market is far more liquid. BBJs tend to sit on the market. I think the absorption rate is something like 450 days on market is the average, because you have to think you have Grant Cardone and Saudi princes. Those are your two buyers of your jet. And if they don't like it, then you're just going to be stuck with it.
That makes
Whereas
sense.
with the 650ER, you know, let's say Ramp might do another up round. I don't know. Maybe there's a buyer there. I don't know. We'll see.
Eric's way too modest.
He's
for
way
that.
too modest, but
Way too modest.
but yeah, I take your point. I take your point.
But hey, Evan Spiegel.
Evan
He's also a
Spiegel.
buyer.
He's got
right?
a BBJ.
That's-
Yeah,
that's
Hanging out
a
at
good
Van Nuys.
point.
He has his own hangar there too.
The snap hanger.
Yeah, when we discussed this, our argument was that BBJ a little bit less flexible on where you can take it. Sure, it makes sense if you're a politician, you're landing at major regional airports, major international airports for big campaign stops. But if you're more of a CEO doing the offsites, doing the ski trips, you want something that can land at a smaller airport. You think that's a reasonable way to think about it?
I think that it's almost like you've been reading my newsletter, because I make that exact argument, because BBJs
Fantastic.
are very cool, but now you're limited to really long runways. And
Yep.
so the whole point of private jets is that you get to access the over 5,000 runways that exist in the United States, which is a fun fact. There's more airports than Chipotle's in the United States.
No
So
way.
like just to put into perspective of like how many airports there are.
Wow.
And we got to triple it. And then we got to triple it again. We need an airport in every suburb of
I mean,
America.
that's the answer to the flying car. Just have airports everywhere. I can fly. Oh, I'm going
Yeah,
10 miles
we
across
have-
town.
We have a
650ER.
Yeah, we've had a popular flying car manufacturer called Gulfstream for a
Yes.
very long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, exactly.
No,
It's
I always
it's a
say
skill
my
issue.
line
It's a
is
money
you
issue.
can sleep in a jet, you can't fly a house. So if you're making
That's a really good point.
If you're making that kind of
if
money,
you're making a
Yeah.
if you're making that, if you're coming up, oh, should I buy my first house? Should I get a private jet? What the answer's obvious. Right?
Answer's obvious.
Lock
Well,
in.
and you guys talk a lot about stock tips. I mean, where better to get good stock tips than the FBO? I mean, it
100%.
is
Right.
prime listening for stock
Yes.
tips.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Talk about. I'd love to get a high level market update on just private aviation broadly. We're at this interesting time. Are we in a correction? Are we in a recession? Is the economy crashing? My sense is that the whales that sort of move the private aviation market are insulated to some degree from fluctuations in the market. But what's happening in your neck of the woods?
So private jet flyers tend to fly above small market corrections, right? So
Yeah.
you look back to 2008. Now there's a lot of carnage there, and a lot of, you've got bad practices obviously in real estate. You had a lot of bad practices in private jets too, and so people were buying positions and flipping them, and just a lot of nonsense shenanigans that happened. What we're experiencing right now is not that. The market has got really hot during COVID. You saw, if you look at valuation softwares in private aviation, and they do exist, you see this kind of depreciation curve, and then there's a pop right at the end of 2020, tended to peak right fall of 2022, which is when all the other sort of assets. So, but really peaked in that. We've been coming down off that high. We're not. I wouldn't say that we're back to normal quite yet. So like if you look at the trajectory we should have been on in 2019, barring the pandemic, because you got to remember, if you remember way back then, which felt like 30 years ago, but during the pandemic, so many people that probably could have flown private but didn't now said, oh, well, I still want to be able to travel, so I'm going to go ahead and fly private. You saw Wheels Up, you saw Vista, you saw all of these companies just kind of go bananas in growth because so many new entrants were into the market. Well, that's since eased off as, interest rates have gone up and kind of the economy's cooled off a little bit, and kind of the fringe private flyers. An interesting quote that I heard in kind of a happy hour setting from an aviation executive was, "There's a lot of wheels up King Air flyers going back to Comfort Plus. They're not even the first class flyers; they're more the Comfort Plus flyers." And so, we kind of had this market correction, but this year there's some tailwinds for 2024, some optimism. 2023 in kind of the transaction space was relatively slow. You typically see a bump in the fourth quarter, and we did again last year, but not quite as sharp as we had kind of in previous years and what everybody's expecting. A lot of people anticipating bonus depreciation. And for those that are not
Yeah, I was going
obsessed
to
with
ask.
buying assets and depreciating them, it means that you can take 100% of the cost in the first year to reduce your tax basis. So what it ends up doing kind of when you do the math, is it's about 20% of your purchase price that you get in tax savings in that first year. So if you finance the aircraft, now you basically are just paying monthly for access to the airplane, and are able to carry it, over the life of that you're owning the aircraft. Charter market slowed down a fair amount last year. It's recovered okay in the first quarter this year, not to the levels that it was in 22 and 23. But it's definitely better, or sorry, 21 and 22. It's better than it was in 2023. But there's been and this is a macro shift into kind of fractional, the net jets and flex jets of the world, even from owning aircraft or chartering. There's been a lot of growth in kind of that segment. So it's a little bit about what we're seeing. Bonus depreciation, whenever it does get passed, is definitely going to be a stimulant to transacting of airplanes.
When
Let's
when is the when will that be decided? Is it known? And is there a prediction market set up for this yet? Are you
That's a
going
good question.
long or
I would
short?
I would love to see if Polymarket's got a 100% bonus depreciation set up, like when it actually happens. So Trump addressed it in the State of the Union speech. He said 100% costing. That's kind of code word for 100% bonus depreciation as the rest of us know it. Um, it was
Just making
almost
up
through
words.
Congress last year.
I love that he's addressing the private jet market in the State of the Union. It's
Yeah.
great.
Well, the private jet
None
market
of that,
got
I know.
it's a beautiful, funny that you mentioned that. It's a beautiful contrast from the last budgetary proposal, which specifically called out private jets something like 12 times,
Whoa.
specifically in like a two-page document, basically saying we're going to cut all of the private jet loopholes for,
Mm.
corporate executives, yada yada yada. Obviously Trump he likes private aviation. I mean, there's no hiding it that Trump appreciates a good private jet.
Yep.
And so yeah, so kind of the sentiment is a little bit more positive. 100% bonus depreciation actually almost made it all the way through Congress last year, but the Republican Senate did not want to give the Biden administration a win before the election, and so it died. But it was there. I mean, we were on the 2 yard line. So I think I don't know exactly when. Kind of what I'm hearing from some of my clients is they're anticipating, one of those any day now type things, from what they're
Yeah.
hearing in Washington. So I think it's any day now.
What about
Um,
Starlink? How has adoption been of Starlink on private jets? It seems like it'd be a no-brainer, but are there barriers to actually retrofitting planes? And are there certain planes that are easier to retrofit? Is it expensive? I imagine that it's got to be the number one request for a lot of people.
It definitely is. Starlink is gobbling up market share, but as a percentage of the overall fleet installation base, it's still pretty small.
Mm.
I don't know exactly off the top of my head what kind of the percentage penetration is,
Mhm.
but it's growing faster than any of the other providers, right? So there's transitions. You have connectivity in private jets has been undergone a little bit of a transition from surface to air. So think cell phone tower to
Mm.
private jet
Mhm.
to satellite from above low Earth orbit. And so there's been the legacy ground to air systems are kind of phasing out. You've got the ATG 4000, for instance, which is a very technical,
Mhm.
older Wi-Fi system. Now they have the selection between, do I go to the L5 Wi-Fi or do I switch over to Starlink? And when you talk about, it's anywhere from 150 to $350,000 to install the equipment.
Mhm.
And then last time that I looked, I think the unlimited Wi-Fi package was like 10 grand a month
Ooh.
for unlimited Starlink.
Okay, that's a
It's
lot.
it's funny. they the way they measure that is by speed. How fast are you going is how they determine how they're going to charge you.
Wow.
So if you go under 300 miles an hour, it's like $200 a month, and if you
No
go
way.
over that, it's like 10,000 a month. So
That's
it's pretty
hilarious.
Crazy.
significantly different.
You ever heard this line before? What's the difference between private aviation and crack cocaine?
I
You
have,
can
yeah.
you can you can quit crack cocaine. I have a more. I'd love to get your take. Vista Jet announced a $600 million investment. I believe it was yesterday. I think that's when we first chatted about having you come on. What are historically private aviation? You see a lot of tech guys look at the market and say, I need to dominate this. I love this. I need to get a piece of it. We've seen sort of a lot of Silicon Valley attempts at cracking the private aviation code that just haven't worked for one reason or another. Some of these companies, like even over the last few years, I feel like they SPAC'd and then like really struggled, right? Talk about the Vista fundraise, and then maybe I'd love to kind of hear you expand around, should venture just stay far away and just let private equity play their game, or are there venture opportunities in the category?
Yeah, so VistaJet just announced a $600 million fundraise, which, interesting enough, that's actually down off of the original leak came in the fall, where it was going to be around $1 billion, and then come February it was going to be 800 million, and then they settled it at $600 million. So, it's not public information of what it raised at. Vista is actually based in Malta, so they're not a U.S. entity, and so there's a lot different reporting rules and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, we're not going to
But
hit the
they
size gong because they didn't
Ooh,
they didn't hit their target, but
that's rough. Maybe a little one.
little golf clap.
Yeah.
little little pencil on the gong.
Yeah.
But really the main reason is when you think about software and you think about financing growth of something that has really low fixed costs and low cost of goods sold, you can really gas it with a bunch of capital, and it's going to just grow really quickly because your cost of goods sold don't scale proportionately with that revenue growth. And that's the whole beautiful point of venture, right? Is that you can, if I've got a pile full of money today, I can throw gas in the fire and it's going to grow exponentially. Well, private aviation is just really expensive. And so Vista, the reason that they raised this mostly is for kind of a deleveraging activity. They had levered up a lot of their assets. They do have a really young fleet, which is part of the appeal for Vista. So if you guys remember back to Taylor Swift flying back for the Super Bowl, if you followed that saga, she flew on VistaJet because they're young airplanes. They're really good at international operations. So if you're going to Asia a lot or you're going to Europe a lot from the United States, this is a really good option for you because not every charter operator is great at that type of international operation. And so they had levered up all of their planes, and then they went on a buying spree and they bought ExoJet, they bought Talon Air, they bought, I mean, like literally went on a private equity style roll up of a bunch of different providers in the space because, having the thought that, if you get to a certain scale, then, you all of a sudden unlock a lot of opportunity. Well, if you think of traditional EBITDA, right? If you remember what the D stands for, depreciation, if you hold the assets, like that's a real cost. That's not just a
Mm.
financial add back cost. And so kind of restructuring some of the debt on their fleet and freeing up free cash flow in order to be able to continue to service their members. And so, they're not publicly traded. They kind of flirted with an IPO a couple of times now. But frankly, the companies in private aviation that have gone public have, tended to struggle because retail investors and institutional investors do not understand this space because they don't understand the cost of the fuel fluctuation costs and the engine maintenance costs. And oh, guess what? All of our pilot salaries just doubled because the airlines doubled. So now we have to follow suit. And so reporting quarter to quarter is really challenging in this business because it's really hard to take a step back in a public market and kind of see the bigger picture. And so that's kind of why these
Well,
companies, you look.
is part of it too that some guys and girls out there love private aviation so much that they'll own an asset almost as a trophy asset. They just don't really care how much money it makes. They just want to say that they're in the game? Is that part of it? And then if you're
Yeah.
trying to compete on really putting up earnings, you're like, well, this guy doesn't care if he makes like, as long as he's breaking even, he's happy.
Yeah.
And we're trying to run a business here. That kind of introduces a pretty poor competitive dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, there's no industry that is sexier. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like to say that you own a portion of a private jet company is something to talk about it, the cocktail factor, which is like a real thing when you're
Yeah.
raising money, right? Hey, check out my B2B SaaS, my B2B HR SaaS that I own. Like no one's gonna be like, oh wow, tell me more.
Well,
Has there been-
not after Monday. They're
Yeah,
gonna be like, what's
not
your
after
spying
Monday.
operation?
Okay, I got
what spies are you doing?
I got a question for you. Has there been any
Corporate espionage?
Corporate espionage meets private aviation, right? Somebody bugging their competitors, Gulfstream, picking up those private conversations. Have we seen that before in the past?
Oh, none that I'm aware of, but that sounds juicy. We
Sure,
might be giving some
sure.
some
We
bad
know.
actors some ideas.
Yeah, no, we know you got some stories, but I do have a question on kind of like the future of the industry. Obviously, a huge cost associated with private aviation is just the pilot, 2 pilots, etc. There's companies like what's the one that does automation for the military, flight automation.
Oh, flight automation? I don't know. Palantir?
Shield.
Shield.
Don't they do
Oh,
this?
Shield.
yeah.
I mean, they make drones, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are there exciting companies working on autonomous flying? I know a lot of the underlying manufacturers have really good autopilot, but how close are we to sort of more integrated systems that are, communicating with air traffic control and actually
I
just
talked
sort
to
of
a
landing?
self-driving or like self-driving cars for the Sky company, but they were working on the C-130.
Yeah.
And then the AC-130, more like
Yeah.
troop transport than
Yeah.
private aviation. But there's a bunch of interesting laws he was talking about where you can't have a non-deterministic system in the loop. Like you can have deterministic software for like cruise control, but you can't have an AI generated non-deterministic system actually choosing to step on the gas or the brakes. And so his solution was he puts an iPad here that tells the human what to do, and then there's a human in the loop at every step. But I'd be interested to just hear about like what's the state of self-driving technology in planes.
Yeah, so there's a big regulatory issue. The FAA is historically, well, it's the government. So like, first of all, like let's
Yeah.
set the benchmark of speed and innovation at that. And then, the FAA is somewhere below whatever that benchmark is, which is by design. I mean, look, nobody wants to feel unsafe when they get on a commercial airliner or even when they're getting onto a private jet. Like regulatory capture in this situation to a certain extent is good. The problem is when you start to disrupt and interrupt some of that regulatory framework, you have to create an entirely new basis for how you think about some of these technologies. So a couple of interesting companies that are doing this, and your point to the in the loop, that's totally right. And I frankly, there's a long slew of basically the whole framework for the regulation is built around the pilot. And so you now have to create a scenario, basically create an entire new regulation for automated flight.
Yeah.
One interesting household name brand company that's doing really cool stuff in kind of the safety world is Garmin. So like they don't just make watches, they also make avionics and aircraft. And so they came out with a feature, I don't know, couple of years ago called Autoland, and it's specifically designed for kind of the owner flown pilot. You can get it in King Airs and Vision Jets and TBMs. I think Epic's about to come out with it, where essentially there's a button, and I call it the oh shit button. And if something happens, you push the oh shit button and the screens go white and it says, okay, we're in emergency scenario. It communicates with the tower. It finds your nearest airport. It puts your gear down. It lines you up on the approach and literally lands you on the runway without a pilot intervention. Now it's literally designed for emergency situations. It's
Yeah.
not for, every
Having
day,
a
but
not for
couple
lazy
extra,
pilots.
or a crew
a
had a
couple
couple extra drinks, and don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Dom
Also,
Perignon, private jets, they mix, but not in the cockpit.
usually
Yep,
John
no,
gets
in the back.
angry if anybody
In the back.
mentions Garmin, but it's in regard to Garmin sport watches.
Oh,
and
yes,
which
yes.
John
We're
is very
sponsored by
against, but
Bezel.
we're supportive of their aviation products.
Yes.
Yeah, the dueling apps on their sport watches is just UX just Um, but anyway, so that's an interesting company.
That's cool.
There's a company called Skyrise. You guys may have heard of them. They've done a couple of raises. I got to fly their simulator over the summer, and so it's a helicopter simulator, and essentially what it is a fly-by-wire system, fully reimagined avionics. And what it does is now there's still a human in the loop, and you're still flying it, but what it does is it sets up like an envelope that you can't go beyond and basically create an unrecoverable situation. So
Wow.
helicopters have a lot of different variables when you're talking about tilt and lift and all that kind of stuff. This basically makes sure that you as the pilot cannot exceed those barriers and put yourself into an unsafe situation. That's really cool because everybody loves to talk about flying cars, and there's been a lot of carnage in the flying car space recently. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like almost every week somebody can't raise another fund. There's a lot of movement actually going to Dubai now in that sector. So the sovereign wealth funds are starting to pick up the slack where US VCs have gotten a little tired with projections. I mean, 2025 is supposed to be our year of flying cars, and I don't know if you see any outside, but I know that I personally don't.
But we got slop on the timeline.
Yep.
So there's that. Last question I'm going to leave you with, Preston. If you were flying, you don't do this very often, but let's say hypothetically you were flying in a commercial aircraft, the pilot had an issue. Would you be able to land a Boeing 707 fairly easily? Are you confident in that? I think every guy I know is pretty confident, but where's your confidence level out of 10?
Yeah, I'm about halfway through my private pilot, so I'm gonna go with better than probably 80% of the guys on board, 90% of the guys. I mean,
okay, so you're
I-
the guy.
You're the guy.
You're the guy we're putting in the cockpit.
I at the very least know what to say to
Sure.
the air traffic controller, and I know the buttons that we need to push to alert everybody that, like, hey, by the way, like,
This is a
heads
disaster.
up, coming in hot.
Coming in hot. Well, thank you for coming in hot. This was a fantastic conversation. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much, our private jet correspondent.
Yeah, well,
we'll have to do the next version of this
on a private plane.
Thank you, by the way. You were helping us look at a flight recently. We didn't end up pulling trigger, but hey, if you're looking to fly private, go talk to Preston. He will walk you through the process and get you some great prices. So thank you for coming on. Look forward to the next conversation.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Cheers.
Talk to you soon.